Hello there, welcome to Planet America. I'm John Barron.
And I'm Chaz Chadallo.
This week, should shooting a dog in the face disqualify you from the vice presidency?
Oh, America. And is Joe Biden risking black lives because he wants black votes? We're going to find out. But first...
Unless something untoward happens between now and then, in 264 days' time, Joe Biden will either be taking the oath of office for a second four-year term or sitting just metres away from Donald Trump as he is sworn back in as president. Either way, time is running out for Joe Biden because even if he wins, he is unlikely to hold on to a Senate majority making major legislation, Chaz. Rather difficult, if not all but impossible.
Of course, even now it's difficult to pass legislation in Congress because Congress is nuts. So another way for Biden to get things done is by getting his agencies to write rules. You don't need Congress for them. But there is a bit of a problem. Congress then has 60 legislative working days to introduce a special joint resolution of disapproval if they don't like that rule. And that resolution of disapproval cannot be filibustered. Worst of all, if Congress and the President do all agree to reject that rule within 60 legislative days, it's gone for good. You cannot bring it back ever again. No. Now, Biden is pretty unlikely to reject any of his own agency's rules, but what if Trump wins the election and the Republicans win both houses of Congress? Then they can get rid of all of Biden's fancy new rules for good, at least the ones that were finalised less than 60 legislative days ago. That, of course, leads to an obvious question. How long is 60 legislative days? Well, Congress have their own special schedule, so it's hard to predict, but the lawyers say that May is the likely deadline for keeping new agency rules safe from being reviewed early next year. And that is why, John, for the last few weeks, Biden has been finalising as many rules as he possibly can.
Yes, it has been a flurry of activities and rules that we're calling Biden's bucket list. And a lot of the items that Joe Biden is ticking off this bucket list seem very much aimed at giving him the best possible chance of staying alive, politically at least. For example, Biden's Labor Department just announced a new rule last week making overtime pay available to 4 million workers on salaries of less than $1,128 per week when they're required to work more than a 40-hour week. So they'll be getting time and a half for those additional hours once the salary threshold goes up in stages from July. Good news, though, for middle-class American workers. If it survives legal challenges, it does go further than an Obama-era rule that was struck down in the court. So we will see on that. But for now, let's tick it off Biden's bucket list.
Non-compete clauses. They are contractual provisions that prevent workers from taking a new job or starting a new business in the same industry. Now, you might think they're just for CEOs or people with top secret info, but 18% of workers in America have non-compete clauses. That's 30 million people, and about 12% of workers in their 30s making $20 an hour or less have non-compete clauses. They are not CEOs. We're talking hairstylists, we're talking fast food workers. It's all a bit out of control. So the Federal Trade Commission has ruled that non-compete clauses for the vast majority of workers will no longer be enforceable, except for non-compete clauses for senior executives. They can remain enforced for now, but no one can enter into a new non-compete clause from now on. And they estimate that that will lead to a 2.7% increase in the rate of new business formation and an average annual earnings increase of $524 per worker per year. Now that is, John, if it gets past the Supreme Court yet again.
Indeed. There's another rule that is likely to go down well in the suburbs, forcing airliners to give automatic refunds to their passengers.
Soon they'll be required to issue credit card refunds within 7 days if passengers decline alternative transportation or travel credits. For domestic flights delayed more than 3 hours and not taken, 6-hour delays on international flights, refunds if a checked bag is not delivered within 12 hours, or if you pay for something you don't get, like Wi-Fi or a better seat.
Pretty good. This new rule also forces American airlines to be more upfront about so-called junk fees, hidden costs for changing your seat or your flight or extra baggage weight, all ahead of the summer vacation season in the United States. So again, likely to be quite popular with consumers/voters, Chaz.
That rule rocks. The next rule is micro-targeted towards the youth vote. The Education Department is expanding their definition of sex discrimination in schools to include sexual orientation and gender identity. Now that might be controversial amongst Republicans, but it's actually based on a recent Supreme Court decision from the Conservative-dominated Supreme Court as well. So there is an irony for you. Regardless, it's going to play havoc with some Republican state laws, like red state laws that stop trans kids from using facilities that match their gender identity, or red state laws that stop schools requiring teachers to use trans kids' preferred names and pronouns. 9 states are already challenging that one in court, John, but I reckon given the court that they're appealing to, they're going to lose. Tick.
Big tick there. For more than 30 years now, federally licensed gun sellers have had to conduct background checks before they can sell someone a gun. But private sellers have been exempt from that rule, and that includes private sellers who buy and sell at gun shows or online marketplaces, long called the gun show loophole. Well, this new rule aims to shrink, if not entirely close, that loophole by expanding the definition of who is engaged in the business of selling firearms to include reselling guns within 30 days or in as new condition, including the original packaging the gun came in. This too is likely to be very popular. While gun control is a deeply divisive issue in the United States, there's overwhelming support for background checks on all gun sales and transfers. 86% in support in a poll just last year. So Biden can tick that one off the list too, Chad.
So many rules, John, but there is one more I wanted to mention, which is the Federal Communications Commission bringing back net neutrality regulations. For those who don't remember, net neutrality makes the blocking of any legal online content illegal. Also, there's no throttling or intentionally slowing down content. There's no creating fast lanes for people who pay more. If this is sounding familiar to you, John Oliver fought hard to support these regulations back in 2018. They became a bit of a symbol of the resistance towards Trump. Senate Democrats at the time memorably suggested that without net neutrality, you'd get the internet one word at a time. Well, Trump got rid of them anyway, and it wasn't the end of the world. In fact, wide median download speeds and wireless median download speeds both increased quite a lot over the last 6 years. But the FCC's bringing net neutrality back anyway, and I don't know if people care about it anymore, but at least it's going to win John Oliver's vote, so tick for that.
Yeah, it does feel a bit 2018, doesn't it?
A little bit. And well, the rule changes have kept on coming even to last night, though, haven't they?
They certainly have. The administration is also now looking at pushing ahead with a change of rules around marijuana, reclassifying it as a less dangerous drug, taking it from a Schedule 1 drug, the most dangerous, to a Schedule 3 drug. It's now on a par with steroids instead of being on a par with heroin. So we can tick that one off the bucket list as well. But not every rule that Biden has proposed is being ticked off the list. For more than 2 years, the administration has been pushing for the Food and Drug Administration to impose rules forcing a national ban on cigarettes that contain menthol, which represents about 1/3 of all cigarettes sold in the United States. Experts say that menthol cigarettes are even more dangerous than regular tobacco products because menthol smokers inhale more deeply and they smoke more cigarettes, and so they are more likely to be dependent and have more trouble quitting. And like many things in America, there is also a strong cultural and racial component to this. 85% of black smokers smoke menthols, and almost half of Hispanic smokers do. And as a result of that, and other factors like less access to good health care, they're more likely to die of lung cancer and other smoking-related illnesses than white smokers. And researchers are now also looking at what they call the African-American smoking paradox, because overall smoking rates for black adults are about the same as white adults, and black smokers even tend to start smoking at a later age, yet tobacco-related illnesses and deaths are disproportionately higher amongst black smokers. Yet that appears precisely why Biden is walking away from the ban. at least for now. Health and Human Services Secretary Javier Becerra noting the historic attention the issue garnered, including from the civil rights and justice movement, and that there are still more conversations to have, and that will take significantly more time. Now, a cynic might suggest that the time frame will be at least until after Biden can get as many black and brown smokers to vote for him in November. This does very much, Chaz, look like politics winning over good policy.
It certainly does. In particular, I can't help noticing that it's black men that are doing the smoking, 21% of them, and I point that out because this menthol rule was supposed to come into effect back in March. Now, that might sound unrelated, but you know what else happened in March? A bunch of headlines like this. Black men are poised to take Trump to the White House. Biden insiders are worried. Lots of polling of black men supporting Trump that month. So it's interesting. It was then that the health secretary decided he needed to have so many more conversations, John.
Yeah, indeed. Well, for more, we're joined by Dr. Mignon Guy, Associate Professor at the Virginia Commonwealth University and a leading expert in the role of race in tobacco-related health inequalities. Dr. Guy, welcome to Planet America.
Thank you for having me.
Can I ask you, Doctor, what was your reaction when you heard the news the Biden administration was putting off their plans to ban menthol cigarettes?
So my reaction is both, you know, you caught me a few days later, but initially my reaction was both shocked and surprised. I'm not remotely surprised that the Biden administration delayed the ban yet again, considering the fact that they had done so previously last year. However, we always have hope that they will follow through and pull through, especially considering the scientific evidence and the basis for the menthol ban. So I was desperately disappointed, to be honest.
And what do you make of the arguments the Biden administration has cited civil rights concerns? Others have said, well, if you're going to ban the cigarettes that black folks like to smoke, menthols, but you're not banning the cigarettes that white folks tend to like, well, that in itself is racism.
So that argument is racist. And the interesting part is that it actually comes from oftentimes from black individuals that have affiliations with the tobacco industry. So it's important to note that those are very clear and well-documented tobacco industry arguments against the ban. When we say to ourselves, oh, it's racist that black people, that we're going to ban a product that black people use and not a product that white people use, they clearly don't understand the basis, the scientific evidence and the basis for the ban. The basis for the ban is the fact that menthol cigarettes are more addictive, that individuals who smoke menthol cigarettes, regardless as to whatever your racialized identity is, have increased nicotinic receptors in their brain, that they have higher levels of dependence, that the topography is different, that youth are more likely to use these products.
And I wonder, Dr. Guy, can you explain for us some of the reasons why we have such a high prevalence of African Americans smoking menthol rather than standard tobacco? Is this a product of history, something cultural? Is this the result of marketing to black smokers?
So the historical and the cultural is another racist argument. That's okay. We'll let that one go. I realize that you're not asking these questions, that these are sort of prevalent thoughts. So initially, black individuals were not black people were not a target market for these products. Black populations became a target market for these products when the Surgeon General's report came out and stated that cigarette smoking is bad for your health, right? This messaging was primarily targeted towards white populations. And so immediately the tobacco industry found a new target audience that was not using these products and thought, oh, we'll sell them to these individuals instead. And what they were able to do, and it's not just about marketing, it's about leveraging historically racist tactics, right? We had Jim Crow, we had redlining, we had residential segregation. So if you have individuals that are concentrated in a specific area or a neighborhood or a community, then it makes it very easy to target those individuals and have increased marketing in those neighborhoods, to have promotional events such as going out. Back in the day, they used to go out and give free cigarettes, pass out free cigarettes in black neighborhoods. The history of black people using menthol cigarettes is not about it being cultural. It's about the tobacco industry shaping a practice and then sort of embedding cultural attributes and leveraging cultural events to be able to sell these products.
So if we were to see this menthol ban revisited in a potential second Biden term, what else would have to go with a ban to make sure that menthol smokers don't just become non-menthol smokers but continue to consume tobacco?
First of all, I do not believe that the ban will ever occur, just so you know. But in the hypothetical scenario in which this imaginary ban could happen and America, the federal government would actually do right by Black people in this country, they would absolutely have to invest in significant amount of resources to research for cessation for menthol cigarettes. One of the things that individuals fail to appreciate, and I see that other countries actually have a greater appreciation of it, is that menthol cigarettes are very, very difficult to quit, as I said before, right? They are more difficult to quit when compared to other cigarettes that do not have menthol as a characterizing flavor. That's the first issue. And Black populations in particular are more likely to make more quit attempts, and they're more likely to have more failed quit attempts when compared to other populations or other individuals who are not using menthol cigarettes, right? Any government that decides to ban a flavored tobacco product needs to have an off-ramp for individuals, and it cannot be another off-ramp that is either equally dangerous, which is non-menthol flavored cigarettes, or presumed to be less harmful that we don't have the evidence base yet to show, such as vaping or vape devices and things of that nature. We need an evidence-based cessation for menthol cigarettes, whether or not we banned it, either way.
Dr. Noem, thank you so much for taking the time to talk to Planet America.
Thank you so much for having me.
With the Republican presidential nomination in the bag for Donald Trump, media speculation has swiftly turned to his potential vice presidential running mate. And one of the most frequently mentioned names thus far is South Dakota Governor Kristi Noem. And it's not unusual for potential candidates to publish an autobiography about now, but Governor Noem may be regretting that decision. It could even cost her the vice presidency.
The book is titled No Going Back, and according to an article for The Guardian, Noem shares the story of shooting her 14-month-old hunting dog. She portrays it as an example of her willingness to do things that are, quote, difficult, messy, and ugly if that task needs to be done.
Indeed, in these extracts that have been published, Noem reportedly writes that she hated that dog after the dog killed some chickens, and that the female white-haired pointer named Cricket was, quote, untrainable, dangerous, and less than worthless as a hunting dog. So she put it down. Well, those wags at the anti-Trump Lincoln Project were quick to pounce on the tail.
Our furry friends can be a lot to keep up with. But when those tough moments come, you have options. Shooting your dog in the face should not be one of them.
Very good advice. Very good advice. This isn't the first time, of course, that a dog has become part of a presidential campaign in recent times. Back in 2012, stories about Mitt Romney putting his dog Seamus in a dog carrier on the roof rack of the family's Chevrolet station wagon helped to convince many voters that he was heartless and shouldn't be president. We'll see what Cricketgate does for Kristi Noem's prospects soon.
I suspect her prospects might be wherever cricket currently is, John. Now, Noem has already alienated Native Americans in her state to the point that she's been banned from 4 South Dakota reservations. She's alienated Christian conservatives with reports that she's engaged in a years-long extramarital affair with Trump sycophant Corey Lewandowski, and she's alienated social conservatives by not signing a bill banning transgender women from competing in women's sports. She didn't want it extended to college athletics, apparently, and that's no problem for a lot of people, but for Republicans, that's a problem. So Noem already has a long line of people looking for an excuse to oppose her, and now they got this. In fact, the only person who seemed impressed by this story was conservative commentator Michael Knowles, who said, "This story makes me like and respect her more." That's a comfort, I'm sure. The thing is, Michael Knowles is best known for this opinion.
I do not want America to be as socially conservative as it was in 2012. I want our civilization to be as socially conservative as we were in 1220, okay? Forget it, I don't even want the 1950s. I don't even want the 1880s. I want 1220. I think that would be a good spot to land at.
So his is not the most reassuring of endorsements, John, although back in 1220 you could probably get away with shooting a dog.
Yeah.
If guns were invented.
In the Dark Ages, I'm not sure they were. While some former Trump administration officials, including the likes of Mike Pence, have made it clear they will not endorse Trump for a second term this year, not so his former Attorney General Bill Barr. Last year, Barr described Trump's alleged actions to steal the 2020 election as, quote, nauseating and despicable, and that Trump shouldn't be anywhere near the Oval Office. Well, now old Bill's had a change of heart, even if it's not a ringing endorsement of Trump.
I'm not going to vote for Biden, this is a wild time. Who knows what's going to happen in 7 months? But I expect, as between Trump and Biden, there's no question in my mind.
And Trump's response to that endorsement was actually quite funny.
Wow, former AG Bill Barr, who let a lot of great people down by not investigating voter fraud in our country, has just endorsed me for president, despite the fact that I called him weak, slow-moving, lethargic, gutless, and lazy. New York Post, based on the fact that I greatly appreciate his wholehearted endorsement, I am removing the word lethargic from my statement. Thank you, Bill. MAGA 2024.
That does show some genuine humour. President Joe Biden, meanwhile, had a good few lines of his own at the White House Correspondents' Dinner on the weekend, including this answer to criticism that he doesn't do enough one-on-one interviews.
The New York Times issued a statement blasting me for, quote, active and effectively avoiding independent journalists. Hey, if that's what it takes to get the New York Times to say I'm active and effective, I'm for it. It's okay.
That was cute, but it is a serious issue. The New York Times statement pointed out that Mr. Biden has granted far fewer press conferences and sit-down interviews with independent journalists than virtually all of his predecessors, and that the Times has sought an on-the-record interview with Mr. Biden, as it has done with all presidents going back more than a century. Politico reported last week on what they called the petty feud between the New York Times and the White House, and the view of the Times publisher, A.G. Sulzberger, that only by doing an interview with a paper like his can verify that the 81-year-old Biden is still fit to hold the presidency. Now, some might argue, Chaz, that is not the media's job, it's the job of voters.
Yeah, a little bit entitled from the New York Times, I reckon. I mean, what are they saying about Jason Bateman's podcast? Because Biden's been interviewed by him twice.
That's confronting.
Actually, the New York Times is totally correct. I do have the numbers on this one. After 3 years, Biden had given just 89 total interviews. 89 compared to 300 from Trump and 422 from Obama at the same stage. Even in earlier, less media-intensive eras, they did more interviews then as well. 135 for W. Bush, 168 for Clinton and H.W. Bush, and 189 for Reagan at the same time, and he was also ancient. Furthermore, Biden hasn't given press conferences either, only 3 by himself, 33 if you count joint presses with foreign leaders, and that compares to 54 from Trump at the same stage and twice as many from Obama and W. Bush. You can see the rest there. Well, hey, Reagan had fewer presses. Wow, woo! Then almost as if to rub the New York Times' noses in it, the very next day, Biden sat for an in-depth interview with Howard Stern, featuring hard-hitting moments like this one.
We're lucky to have you in the Oval Office and serving as the father of the country, because if you're a good father to your family, which you are, I know you'd be a good father to the country.
That's a gotcha.
Although, to be fair, the whole administration is braving hard-hitting interviews like that one.
I've been thinking that we really all need a tremendous hug in the world right now. But in our country, we need you to be Mamala of the country.
They're the mother and father of the country. Oh, God. Look, obviously, I'm just kidding about those clips. They're just hilarious. I had to play them. Sure. And to be fair, Howard Stern did extract a real commitment from Biden on this.
I don't know if you're going to debate your opponent.
I am somewhere, I don't know when. I'm happy to say it.
So that's something, John. We were wondering if he'd do the debates, and there you go.
Maybe Howard's going to be the moderator as well.
Election 2024. What's at stake?
All while in New York, you can't go into Duane Reade, you can't go into CVS and buy skin lotion.
Former President Trump's claim of far-reaching presidential immunity from prosecution went before the US Supreme Court this week.
Trump argues the president does have absolute immunity, saying he cannot function if he's prosecuted for official acts.
A president has to have immunity. If you don't have immunity, you just have a ceremonial president.
Trump is the first American president to face criminal charges.
And while it does seem that the majority of the court is unlikely to support Trump's blanket immunity argument, a decision requiring lower courts to consider the extent of immunity does now seem likely, making those other federal criminal cases a lot less likely to go to trial before November's election, meaning if Trump is re-elected, he can make them all go away. Meanwhile, the state of New York's business records and hush money case against Trump is into its third week. He has been found in contempt of the court over public criticisms in breach of a gag order on 9 occasions. And while the judge is threatening him with possible jail time, but he's actually, Chaz, only imposed a $9,000 fine.
Although, to be fair, that was the maximum fine that he was actually allowed to impose for that charge. He wanted to fine him more, but hands are tied.
Yeah, it's not going to make a huge dent in the Trump coffers. All in all, it has been a lighter hearing schedule in New York for the last few days, so we'll save up our analysis for Friday night on the Fireside Chat. But before we go, Chaz, we have some malarkey to bust.
That's a bunch of malarkey.
We do indeed. Last week, Trump was experiencing some serious protest envy. He put out the call several times on Truth Social, posting things like, "Go out and peacefully protest, rally behind MAGA, save our country. The only thing you have to fear is fear itself." And just in case that wasn't clear, he elaborated, "American-loving protesters should be allowed to protest at the front steps of courthouses." Very subtle. Unfortunately, while nearby Columbia University had only too many protesters on Monday morning last week, Trump's trial wasn't quite as big an attraction as that.
Trump promised there'd be a lot of people here to show their support. So 1, 2.
Oh, wait, sorry, 3.
Of course, Trump wasn't going to admit that, so he came up with this excuse.
It's interesting outside for great Americans, people that want to come down and they want to protest at the court, and they want to protest peacefully. We have more police presence here than anyone's ever seen. For blocks, you can't get near this courthouse.
And that, of course, led to journalists immediately hopping outside and giving us a 360-degree panorama of utter emptiness. It was post-apocalyptic empty out there, which would only have frustrated Trump more. Thankfully, though, the next morning, Trump did find some supporters to engage with.
It was around 6:30 when Trump showed up here to 48th Street and Park Avenue to this building that's under construction. Here he met with construction workers as well as supporters. We saw dozens of people in hard hats, a lot of MAGA hats out here, many thrilled just to shake his hand. We heard a lot of chanting, obviously a lot of "We Love Trump" chanting out here.
So that's nice, isn't it? Trump stopping by to make the days of some ordinary working Joes. Just one problem.
Well, they had heard about it through some of these people who are, they'd be vetted and cleared, right, from security. So in terms of who was out here, it was probably people that kind of knew about it and from the Trump team, so they could have some people out here who were supporters.
Turns out they were supporters brought out by the Trump team. Now, look, if these were just Trump supporting construction workers bust out to the location, then this story wouldn't exist. But let me introduce you to Vish Barr. He's the man behind George Santos, apparently, and now he's the man keen to meet Donald Trump.
How was it seeing the former president?
Oh, it was absolutely incredible to see him on the streets of Manhattan, meeting up with, your working class folks here, the type that are out working hard at 6 a.m. It was my first time ever meeting him.
So apparently, John, they weren't all construction workers. Look, Trump isn't the first one to set up PR opportunities. Political campaigns do that all the time. It's not a mortal sin. But what it is, John, is malarkey.
That it is, Chaz, and that is it for another action-packed trip to Planet America. We'll see you on ABC News at 8 p.m. Eastern on Friday night for a fireside chat.
And we're going to be back on Planet America at 10 p.m. next Wednesday on ABC TV and from 9 p.m. on ABC iView. Both shows are also on YouTube and Facebook whenever you like. See you there.
Bye-bye.